You found your way to Whispers of Crimes, a quiet corner where the shadows of the past are gently told. Here, we speak of real crimes and mysteries, not to shock or scare, but to wonder, to reflect, and maybe to help you fall asleep. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow down, and come with me into tonight's case. On a summer day in 2011, Norway's peace was shattered forever. One man, armed with bombs and bullets, unleashed a horror no one could imagine. A government bombing, a youth camp massacre, 77 lives lost in cold blood. Who was Anders Behring Breivik, and what drove him to commit the unthinkable? Dive deep into the mind and actions of Norway's darkest chapter. This is a story of ideology, isolation, and tragedy. Chapter 1. A life of isolation and resentment. Anders Behring Breivik was born on February 13, 1979, in Oslo, Norway. From early childhood, his life was marked by instability. His parents, Wenche Behring and Jens Breivik, divorced when he was just 1 year old. A custody dispute ended with Anders living with his mother, who was later described in psychological evaluations as emotionally unstable and overly dependent on her son. Social services had even considered removing him from her custody, citing concerns over her mental health and emotional abuse, but ultimately did not act. As a youth, Breivik was intelligent but socially isolated. He had a normal upbringing on the surface. He attended school, had friends, and played video games. Yet he gradually drifted into a world of fantasy and superiority. In his teenage years, he dabbled in graffiti and minor crime, earning a police record at 15. His relationship with his father was strained and eventually cut off entirely when his father disapproved of his behavior. In his early 20s, Breivik immersed himself in bodybuilding and cosmetic enhancements, reflecting a growing obsession with control and identity. At the same time, he became deeply involved in online forums where he encountered far-right ideologies. These communities fueled his growing hatred for multiculturalism, Islam, feminism, and what he called cultural Marxism. Unlike traditional forms of extremism, Breivik's radicalization was solitary and self-directed, with the internet serving as his echo chamber. He later claimed to have deliberately withdrawn from society to prepare for what he saw as a coming civil war in Europe. He believed liberalism had made the continent weak and saw himself as a savior, a self-styled knight embarking on a crusade to preserve European Christian identity. Chapter 2. The Making of a Manifesto. From 2009 to 2011, Breivik poured his life into creating 2083, a European Declaration of Independence, a manifesto that combined paranoid conspiracy theories, white nationalist ideology, and anti-Islamic propaganda. The document spans over 1,500 pages and includes fictionalized diary entries, bomb-making instructions, and plagiarized passages from American and European right-wing thinkers. The manifesto, published online just hours before his attacks, is organized into 3 parts. The first criticizes multiculturalism and claims that European culture is being overrun by Muslim immigrants, aided by liberal elites. The second lays out the so-called Knights Templar Network, a fictional militant group Breivik claimed to represent tasked with reclaiming Europe through armed resistance. The third is a personal journal detailing his preparations for the attack, including logistical steps, workout routines, and emotional reflections. Breivik presented himself as a martyr willing to sacrifice his life for the greater good. He idolized historical crusaders and drew inspiration from anti-Islamist bloggers and populist politicians. Notably, he quoted thinkers like Friedman, Robert Spencer, and Batyer, figures often accused of fueling Islamophobic narratives. Though none endorsed violence, Breivik interpreted their work as justification for it. Despite being a lone actor, Breivik framed his actions as part of a broader ideological struggle. He believed history would vindicate him and that others would follow his example. This delusional but methodical mindset would culminate in the worst mass killing in Norway since World War II, Chapter 3, July 22, 2011, the Oslo explosion. At approximately 3:25 p.m. on July 22, 2011, a massive explosion ripped through the heart of Oslo. A white Volkswagen crafter van, rigged with over 950 kilograms of ANFO explosives, detonated outside the Norwegian Prime Minister's office in the government quarter. The blast killed 8 people, injured more than 200, and caused massive destruction to buildings, including the Ministry of Justice and the Oil and Energy Ministry. The streets, usually bustling with life, were turned into a war zone. Glass and debris littered the area. People fled in panic. Smoke rose hundreds of feet into the air, and the Norwegian public, initially, believed the country had fallen victim to an international terrorist attack, likely perpetrated by Islamic extremists. But this was only part one of Breivik's carefully choreographed attack. Dressed in a police uniform and driving a rented vehicle, he made his way northwest toward Utøya Island, where the Labour Party's youth wing was holding its annual summer camp. What set this bombing apart was not just its domestic origins, but the deception involved. Breivik had spent years preparing, even setting up a fake farming company, Breivik Geofarm, to acquire large quantities of fertilizer legally. He conducted test detonations in rural areas and kept a detailed log of his progress. No one suspected him. He had no criminal record, no formal links to extremist groups, and lived a relatively unremarkable life on the surface. The Oslo bombing was meant as a distraction to draw police and media attention away from the true horror that would unfold just over an hour later. Chapter 4, Terror on Utøya Island by 5 p.m. Breivik had arrived at Utøya, claiming to be a police officer sent to secure the island in light of the earlier bombing. He was granted access to the camp. What followed was one of the deadliest mass shootings in modern history. Over the next 72 minutes, Breivik methodically hunted down teenagers attending the Workers' Youth League camp, executing 69 people, most of them between 14 and 19 years old. Survivors recall Breivik calling them over, pretending to offer help, and then shooting them point blank. He used hollow point bullets to cause maximum internal damage. Some campers attempted to hide under beds, in bathrooms, or behind trees. Others leapt into the frigid waters of Terrasjorden, trying to swim to safety. Police response was hampered by logistical failures. The first units reached the lake's shore within 30 minutes, but lacked access to suitable boats. The National SWAT team arrived nearly an hour after the massacre began, using a civilian boat to reach the island. Breivik surrendered without resistance at 6:34 p.m. In total, 77 people died that day. Many of the survivors were severely injured or psychologically scarred. Norway, a peaceful, egalitarian nation, was left stunned and broken. The country hadn't experienced such violence since the Nazi occupation. The symbolism of the attack was devastating. The youth camp represented the future of the Labour Party and, by extension, Norway's liberal values. Breivik had chosen his targets precisely because they embodied the ideals he despised. Chapter 5. The trial of a domestic terrorist. Breivik was arrested on site and immediately confessed. Yet he denied criminal guilt, claiming self-defense against cultural genocide. His trial began in April 2012 under intense media scrutiny. The key legal question was not whether he committed the crimes. He openly admitted it, but whether he was sane and accountable. Initial psychiatric evaluations yielded conflicting conclusions. One declared him paranoid schizophrenic, citing his grandiose delusions. A second, however, found him sane, but deeply narcissistic and ideologically obsessed. The court sided with the second evaluation. During the trial, Breivik used the courtroom as a political stage, expressing admiration for al-Qaeda's commitment to violence and claiming that Western society had to be shocked awake. He repeatedly performed Nazi salutes and attempted to legitimize his ideology. On August 24, 2012, he was sentenced to 21 years of preventive detention, the maximum sentence under Norwegian law. This unique form of incarceration allows for indefinite extensions every 5 years if the prisoner is still deemed dangerous, essentially amounting to life imprisonment. The trial underscored Norway's commitment to due process, even for someone responsible for unthinkable crimes. There was no death penalty, no extraordinary detention. The judiciary's calm and measured approach won international respect, but also sparked debates about the limits of leniency in the face of ideological terrorism. Chapter 6: Aftermath and National Reflection. The aftermath of July 22nd was a period of deep mourning and reflection for Norway. Memorials were held across the country, and King Harald and Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg addressed the nation with messages of unity and defiance against hate. Yet grief soon gave way to self-examination. How had such a plot gone undetected? Why were security services unaware of Breivik's activities, despite his years of planning? A 2012 commission report cited failures in intelligence gathering, poor emergency coordination, and insufficient preparedness for domestic terrorism. Survivors and families of the victims became vocal advocates for anti-extremism education, hate crime legislation, and more robust mental health services. The A rebuilt its presence, and Urea Island was eventually reopened as a site of remembrance and democratic learning. Still, debates emerged over memorialization. Some felt Breivik should be forgotten. Others argued his crimes must be remembered to prevent future tragedies. The challenge for Norway was preserving openness and tolerance without becoming naive to extremism's threat. Chapter 7: Legacy of Violence and Echoes Across the World. Since his incarceration, Breivik has remained a controversial and dangerous figure. Despite being held in near-complete isolation in Scheme Prison, he has filed numerous lawsuits against the Norwegian state, claiming that his human rights are being violated due to his strict confinement. His demands have included better access to communication, gym equipment, and even access to right-wing materials. Worse still, Breivik has become a symbolic figure among certain extremist groups. White supremacists and far-right terrorists in other countries have referenced his writings and actions, including the 2019 Christchurch shooter Brenton Tarrant, who praised Breivik in his own manifesto. These connections reveal the troubling transnational appeal of violent ideologies and the internet's role in sustaining them. Norway continues to grapple with how to handle Breivik's legacy. He remains incarcerated with little prospect of release, but the social wounds he inflicted are still healing. His name evokes not just horror, but the stark reminder that extremism can grow in silence, behind closed doors and in seemingly peaceful societies. That's all for tonight's story. Another thread in the web of true crime, quietly unraveling as the night goes on. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if sleep has already taken you, may your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. I'll be here next time by the fire with another story waiting to be told. Good night, and don't forget to lock your doors.